Hi everyone, welcome to our lesson on work safety. We're going to look today at your rights and your responsibilities as an employee, and we're also going to look at what the rights and responsibilities of an employer are as well. Let's go ahead and get started here today. So some questions about your rights. What are your rights? That's something we need to know as employees. What are your obligations? So if something happens at work, for example, you're injured, what are your responsibilities? Where do you find out information about your rights and your obligations? Well, the place you go to find out this information is called the Employment Standards Act. It sets out the minimum standards that apply to most workplaces in BC. It also informs you of your rights to ensure a fair and safe work environment. You can find online the Employment Standards Act and read over it for yourself. Often your workplace will also have a copy of the Employment Standards Act for you to refer to. Let's go over some of the major issues that you may have to deal with in the workplace. We're going to start by looking at injuries at work, what you do when you get injured at work, and what your rights and responsibilities are. Refusing unsafe work, pay periods and wages, what your rights are, fair hiring processes, and harassment policies that exist in the workplace. Let's start off by looking at injuries at work. If you are injured at work, you must report that injury to your employer. That's one of your responsibilities as an employee. Your employer then must report the event as well. They have to keep a record of the event. If it is a minor injury, usually all that happens is you report it, they document it at work. Later on, if that minor injury becomes something more serious or causes you problems later, that event has been documented and it can then be dealt with. If your injury is serious at the time of the injury and you may have to go to the doctor or you have to travel to the hospital, the employer is responsible to cover the costs of transportation to the hospital. So whether that is just your gas to the hospital or in the event that you have to call an ambulance, if you're not covered, then the employer must cover the cost of that ambulance ride. What if you're seriously injured at work? This happens. Some workplaces are more uh, dangerous than other workplaces in terms of the type of work that you do. But often a serious injury can happen at any workplace. You could fall off of a ladder, you could slip and break your arm. So there's some serious injuries that can happen at any workplace. If this happens and you are not able to work for a short period or a long period of time, you may receive compensation. Compensation means money, okay, for the time that you lost at work. If you're not being paid for that time, you are entitled to some compensation if the injury happened at your work and it was documented. So you must, in order to receive compensation, you must contact WorkSafe BC. WorkSafe BC can be contacted online, www.worksafebc, and the process is actually outlined on their website. You can also call WorkSafe BC and talk to them about your injury. It's very important if you're injured at work that you do tell your employer. It must be documented. Um, you cannot be penalized by your employer for being injured. So you cannot be fired because you got injured at work, and you cannot legally be demoted, okay, or penalized in any way, so punished in any way by your employer for being injured. It is your responsibility to report the injury immediately. Also, it's your responsibility to report any unsafe situations at work. If you notice, for example, that the floor is wet or that a machine has been left turned on and it should be turned off, and it's not a safe machine to be left on. If you notice that books or large boxes are in a place where they might fall, or that any other condition at work is unsafe, inside and out, directly outside of your workplace, it is your responsibility to report it. It prevents other people, including yourself, from getting injured. If you do get injured at work, particularly a serious injury, if you go to the WorkSafe BC website, this is what's laid out for you. They give you a couple of options. One is that you can file a claim by calling the phone number given to you. You can talk to a person from Monday to Friday from 8 to 4 p.m. And that claim representative will open a claim for you and discuss the process with you. Your other option is to submit your claim online. So you can also go ahead and go to their website, and you will fill out something called a Form 6 online. You can get that Form 6 from their website, and you are, in order to receive compensation, you must go ahead and do this process. From then on, you will have a claim number, you will have a user ID and a password, and you can then follow your claim, and you will be notified if you're going to receive compensation. If you, I'm going to go back one page. If you do, if you are injured at work seriously, when you go to visit a doctor, they will also give you a form to fill out there too. It's called a WCB form. And if you are injured and you go to a doctor, to a hospital, it's very important that you tell them that the injury happened at work. That you say, this injury happened at work. If you tell them you're injured, they won't assume that it happened at work. But as soon as you tell them that it happened at work, they will ensure that you fill out the correct paperwork there. And you will need that paperwork when you file your claim. Okay, so if you do have to go to a doctor or a hospital, it's really important you tell them that the injury happened at work. Let's talk about refusing unsafe work. If you believe that you have been asked to do work that is not safe or that you are not trained to do, it is your responsibility to tell your supervisor that you are not comfortable with that work. You must immediately report the unsafe conditions to your supervisor. So if they have asked you to do something and they did not realize that the conditions were unsafe, it's your responsibility to tell them. You do not have to do the work at that point in time. You have to report that that work is unsafe. And then they or you can fix the situation before you do that work. The unsafe situation must be remedied, which means before work can be done, whatever is unsafe about that situation must be fixed. They must make that task a safe task to carry out. Or if you have not been trained, you need to be trained on that task so that you can do it safely. If it is not changed, so if the unsafe situation remains unsafe, your employer must give you something else to do. Okay, you cannot be punished for refusing unsafe work, but it also means that you are not given a day to do absolutely nothing at work. You still are expected to do what your employer asks you. They can give you a different task to do that is safe. If a solution cannot be worked out, sometimes, sorry folks, let me just move that out of the way for you. Sometimes an employer and an employee cannot agree that work is safe. For example, as the employee, you tell your employer that you don't believe work is safe. They tell you it is safe and you should do it, and you cannot come to an agreement. At that point, you need to contact WorkSafe BC. So if a solution cannot be reached, an officer from WorkSafe BC will come to your work site and investigate the situation. He or she will determine if that work is safe or unsafe. And if they determine that the work is safe, at that point you must continue to work and do that work. If they determine that the work is unsafe, then they will order the employee to fix or remedy the situation before you have to, before you are able to complete that work. And so WorkSafe BC is the number to call if you find yourself in a situation like that at work. Under the Workers' Compensation Act, you cannot be punished, dismissed, which means sent home without pay, fired, or discriminated against for refusing unsafe work. It's your right to refuse unsafe work, but it's also your responsibility to report work that is unsafe. You should not be punished or hurt by refusing unsafe work. If you believe that you have been discriminated against or you have been unfairly punished, dismissed, or fired for refusing unsafe work, you need to contact WorkSafe BC. Again, WorkSafe BC will help you through that process and will determine whether or not you have been fairly, if you were terminated, for example, what the reasons were for that. And they will also help to rectify that situation if you feel that you've been discriminated against. Let's talk about pay periods and wages. Currently, the minimum wage in BC is $8 an hour. People shouldn't be paid below the minimum wage. Employees should be receiving a paycheck 2 times each month, and an employer must pay within 8 days of the end of a pay period. So you should be expecting to receive 2 paychecks on a monthly basis for your work. Okay, even if you don't work full time, you should still expect to receive those 2 paychecks. If work is prevented for reasons that are beyond your control and beyond the employer's control, if you come into work that day, you should still be paid for at least 2 hours of work. So for example, if you came into work and there was a power outage and you were not able to work that day, you should be paid for at minimum 2 hours. If you worked longer than 2 hours, you should be paid for your actual time worked. If you came in and worked for only half an hour that day, you should be paid for 2 hours. Okay, that's the law. Employers are not legally allowed to pay different wages based on gender. So a male and a female doing the exact same job, okay, so for similar or the same work, should be receiving equal payment for those. Fair hiring processes are a legal process that employers must follow. So assuming that a person is qualified for a position, they should not be fired or refused hiring based on race, skin color, ancestry, place of origin, where you were born, political beliefs, religion, marital status, so whether you are single, divorced, married, physical or mental disability, sex, meaning your gender, female or male, sexual orientation, age, okay, or any combination of these. A person should be hired or fired based on their work performance and their qualifications, and none of these factors. In the workplace, there are also harassment policies. Different workplaces will have different policies, but most harassment policies do not allow, prohibit, okay, demeaning remarks, so rude remarks to another person, racist comments or insulting comments about a person's race, gender, ancestry, religion, threats or hate letters at work, Inappropriate touching at work. This would fall under the category of sexual harassment. Suggestive remarks are, again, usually sexual remarks or remarks that might elicit sex, for example. Um, remarks that are sexual in their nature and they make you feel uncomfortable. Punishment or rejection for the rejection of sexual advances. So, for example, if a coworker or employee invites you to have sexual relations with them and you decline, you say no, you should never be punished for that. Okay. Posters that are sexually explicit, so pornographic posters or other sexually explicit posters at work. If you see these and you are uncomfortable with them, you should be letting your employer know that. And at that point, most workplaces should not have them visible, but if they do, they should be taking them down, particularly if somebody says that they're uncomfortable with them. So all of those would constitute harassment. And if any of these have happened, you as an employee have the right not to be harassed at work. And you can, if you feel that this has happened, it's best to talk to your employer, but you can also go through the BC Human Rights Tribunal, which deals with harassment and sexual harassment in the workplace. So BC Human Rights Tribunal. And in class, as well as online, when you go to harassment in Unit 1, all of the contact information is given to you in a document. Where do you go? If you have questions about your legal rights or something happens at work and you're not sure if what your rights are and what your responsibilities are, there's a few different places that you can go. Okay, the public library is one place you can go, or your school library, and they often have many of these resources available to you, as well as internet connections. You can go to an employment center in your area. They are often able to give you advice, help you, as well as help you guide you through the correct processes. WCB, Workers' Compensation Board, as well as WorkSafe BC. Your workplace is also a great place to find out information. Often at your workplace, documents like the Employee Standards Act will be available to you. Most of the forms that you need when you're injured are also available at your workplace. And you can always ask your employer about your rights and responsibilities. They can often give you information about that as well. Other documents that you may need. If you feel that you've been harassed or discriminated against, the Human Rights Act outlines all of your rights as a person living in Canada, as well as in the workplace. Okay, and again, if you feel you've been discriminated against, the contact is the BC Human Rights Tribunal, and they also have an online website that you can look at. This contact information is given to you under 1.12, I believe it is. In Unit 1, it's called the harassment lesson. And if you go to that lesson on harassment, you will see that information is given to you. Workers' Compensation Act. Again, if you're wondering about if you've been injured at work and you're not sure if you should receive compensation, okay, or you have questions about salary, the Workers' Compensation Act will give you that information. And finally, if you belong to a union at work, the Labor Relations Code, and this is available to you often online as well. If you contact your union representative, they'll give you a copy of the Labor Relations Code. It's often available at your workplace as well, and you can look up any questions that you have about salary or your rights, hours, just about any information there, discrimination, and it will be in the code. That's only if you belong to a union. So there's lots of great information out there for you as a worker, and there's lots of places that you can go to get that. Thanks very much for joining me today. Bye for now.